See 3.co.uk for details. Pay as you go requires an add-on.
It's 9 o'clock across the UK. Leading Britain's conversation, LBC. This is Phone Farage.
Here's your chance, take it.
Ukip leader Nigel Farage takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. This is Phone Farage with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Only on LBC.
It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 13th of February, and this is Nigel Farage bringing you your latest edition of Phone Farage on LBC. I'm here for the next 30 minutes taking your calls, and this is your chance to put any question you like to me, and I will endeavour to answer it. So here are the numbers for you to get in touch. Ring 0345 60 60 973. That's 0345 60 60 973. Or email nigel@lbc.co.uk. And don't forget, you can also watch Phone Farage in high definition on the website, lbc.co.uk. And we're going to go straight to our first caller, who this morning is Sally from Kingston. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. I hope you're well.
I am.
Good. No hangover.
No, listen, Sally, I've just, had the whole of January without a single alcoholic drink. How about that?
I think that's really good.
So I've
really
lost
good.
weight,
Anyway,
and I'm fit, so far away.
Good. Well, I hope you stay like that, indeed. Nigel, I know where you stand on the EU, and I'm very supportive of that because of overcrowding of our schools, prices of property, etc., and minimum wage, etc. But I don't know where you stand fully on things like, would you like to get rid of the House of Lords, like I would? Trade unions, how you feel about them? Taxes, monopolies, fracking.
Oh, gosh. Well, now look, Sally.
Lots of things.
Well, thank you. We're going to need a long time, so I will endeavour to do a quick fire. Yes, I don't want to be members of the EU, not just because of open borders and migration, but because I don't think that 75% of our laws should be made somewhere else. I think they should be made here, and that elections should really matter in Britain. And I also do rather object to the fact that it costs this country a gross contribution of nearly £55 million a day. You mentioned the House of Lords. I think this country needs electoral reform. I don't think the House of Lords is at the top of that. What I do think, Sally, is that our first-past-the-post electoral system is now bankrupt. It used to work when we had two big parties and virtually nobody else, and it simply isn't working.
Could I just pop a word in there about the House of Lords? I mean,
yeah.
It costs a lot of money for one. It's unelected, like the EU at the top. And also, it's given out as favours to friends of parties. I mean, it's an elitist group. Do you want to keep it in this country?
I think the House of Lords has been massively devalued over the course of the last 15 years by a record number of people being put into the upper house, and as you quite rightly say, in many cases they turned out to be donors of the Labour or the Conservative or the Liberal Democrat parties, and it is too big, it is unwieldy. Yes, the House of Lords needs reform, all right? I'm in no doubt about that. I think we will move towards an elected second chamber, probably along the lines of a Senate at some point in the future. But I repeat, my priority is that we get electoral reform for the House of Commons, number one, and number two, I want us to have a form of direct democracy in this country where if we think Parliament's getting things wrong, we can call a referendum on a key subject. Now, you went on to ask me a whole list of other things. Taxes, well, look,
Could I just interrupt just a little bit on taxes? Tell me, Nigel, now tell me truly.
Well, you've asked me,
so I've avoided paying tax.
Well, the tax avoidance issue is really interesting. Lord Fink said everybody avoids paying tax. Well, that clearly isn't true, because loads of people are on PAYE and they have absolutely no choice about the tax they pay. What I would say is nobody willingly pays more tax than they have to, and that is certainly true.
Answer the question, Nigel. I know you don't pay any more tax than you want to, but
No.
have you avoided deliberately? Have you taken measures in your whole life to avoid?
I have never avoided any tax. I don't think I've ever avoided any tax myself through any complicated measures or in... Oh, no, I haven't. I haven't.
An accountant that's looking after your affairs.
Yes, I have an accountant, does everything. Of course I do. And particularly since I was elected to the European Parliament 16 years ago, it's an issue over which I've got to be incredibly careful. You raised a whole load of other questions. We're going to campaign for no tax on minimum wage. We're going to campaign for an end to inheritance tax, which of course would stop a lot of the schemes that people use to legally avoid tax or for their children to avoid tax. And Sally, a whole load of other questions, but I think for now there are lots of other people that want to speak to me, and I thank you.
And indeed, I am one of them.
Oh,
Sally,
Nick, hello.
Hello, sir. Yes, indeed. I'm over in New York. I'm coping somehow. It's goodness knows something past 4 o'clock in the morning, but you're sounding on fine form, and well done with your health kick through January. I'm glad to hear you're in fine fettle. Good luck to you, sir. Just a quickie. Is David Cameron a dodgy bloke surrounded by dodgy backers?
I think that was a word that Ed Miliband will come to regret. Very wealthy people, and particularly those that have businesses and houses and perhaps families around the world, do legally use what's available to them to avoid paying tax. Some of that is straightforward. Some of it, in the case of one or two well-known celebrities, look to be highly immoral. So I think that Ed Miliband getting onto this turf, I think this debate is a race to the bottom. And I think already we've seen one of the national newspapers today highlighting that after Ed Miliband's father had died, the family subsequently changed the will so that the two sons wouldn't be lumbered with in the end with too much inheritance tax. So I think the use of the word dodgy, Ed will come to regret. What is for certain is that the Conservative Party does have enormously wealthy backers, and it goes into this general election with more money than has ever been seen before in British politics.
Shall we move to other callers, Mr. Farage?
We're going to go on, and we're going to go to Raj in Blackheath. Good morning, Raj.
Good morning, Mr. Farage. I'd just like to say, I just wanted to find out what your stance was on the CO2 emissions. I believe the lady mentioned fracking, but what's actually happening out there? Because I listen to the radio and I hear a lot about hospitals and this and that, but really there's a bigger issue, and I know that Europe and America are very ahead of this. There was the Kyoto Protocol, but I don't hear anything too much about what the issue is with you guys. I'd like to know. It'd be wonderful.
I think there are lots of sensible and good things that have been done. I drove my car this week from home to Strasbourg and back, and I got 40% more miles to the gallon than I was getting with my previous car 5 years ago. That's an example of good technology, reducing the amount of fossil fuels and therefore carbon dioxide emissions that we produce. So all of that is good and all of that is sensible. My problem, Raj, is this. This country produces about 1.8% of global CO2 emissions, okay? And
the cement industry is the massive issue, and I'm looking at that one.
Well, let's talk about the cement industry. Let's talk about the aluminium industry. Let's talk about the steel industry. Let's look at the industrial massacre that has taken place to British manufacturing as a result of carbon taxes. And all that has happened, Raj, is that production has been moved to India and other parts of the world, and then the products that would have been made here are shipped back to us. Nothing that we've done here with our industries has reduced CO2 emission, but at the same time, we've disadvantaged British manufacturing. So I'm all for being sensible. I would love to find renewable energies that worked. Wind energy doesn't. But for the moment, I'm just making an argument that all the while India and China are mining coal on the scale that they are, let's not destroy British industry in the name of meeting a series of EU targets on CO2 emissions.
So what would Ukip do, Mr. Farage? Just one briefly, Raj. What would Ukip do with all the wind turbines if you had your say? Nigel Farage, what would you do?
End all subsidy. Why on earth we've put 12% on the electricity bill of everybody in the country, and it's rather more than that on all of our businesses, so that rich landowners can be paid vast sums of money for doing nothing? I do not know. You'll have noticed, you've been away, Nick, but this week there's been a big high pressure sat over the United Kingdom. Virtually none of the wind turbines have produced anything this week. and very often, the periods of least wind are during the winter when the demand for electricity is actually at its peak. If someone can show me, that for example, solar energy is really close to being working and won't need taxpayer subsidy, I'll cheer to the rafters. But wind, I believe, has been a massive mistake, and UKIP would end all subsidy for it right away.
Quick response from you, Raj, then we must move on.
Yeah, just quickly. As far as the wind and that, that's not an area that I'm looking at. I'm talking about that the CO2 emissions or what's happening out there. There's a couple of industries. I went to UKTI to speak to them about the cement industry because I have something I want to offer. I want to offer Britain, actually. And I'm just saying that how to speak to them about it, but they just don't get it right now. And I want to work with people. My vote obviously is going to count. I want to put my vote somewhere this year. I want to make sure it goes to the right place where they're doing something and I'm going to actually be heard about what I've got to offer, whereas they don't get it. There's a lot going on out there.
There's a quick pitch then, I must end, Raj. Quick pitch from Nigel Farage for your vote. Nigel, briefly, if you would, sir.
Raj, I know I've spoken to the cement industry. I've also spoken to the refining industry. If we go on taxing people and making ourselves uncompetitive, both of those businesses will lose this country, following aluminium and others that have gone in the last few years. So yes, we're right to be concerned, but we must not destroy British manufacturing to meet EU targets, all right?
Who's next on the phone?
Who's next is Tony from Palmer's Green. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Nigel. A question about the flat tax. I'd be interested to know how you can say you don't support a flat tax when less than 2 years ago, well past the last election, you were very clear that Ukip wanted to bring one in.
One of our spokesmen, Mr. Bloom, has been an avid campaigner for flat tax, and I understand that. What we are putting in our manifesto are flatter and simpler taxes, all right? And we will do that chiefly by recognising that the biggest problem in the tax system at the moment is the fact that so many people who want to come off benefit and go to work start paying tax too early. So we will campaign for no tax on minimum wage, and yes, we want flatter, simpler taxes. But do I think we need a degree of graduation in the tax system? Yes, I do. What do you think?
Response from you?
Yes, I'd just like to know how it would work, because at the moment you get a personal allowance up to whatever it is, 10,000 or whatever. Yeah. How would the flat tax work then? Would it be similar to that? Or?
I'm not proposing a flat tax. There are some countries that have done flat tax. When the Berlin Wall fell, many of the Baltic states, for example, and other parts of Eastern Europe went for a simple flat tax system where everybody pays the same percentage of tax. And it was an idea that UKIP looked at and talked about 5 years ago. It's not an idea we're looking at and talking about at the moment. We think the most important thing is that people who are not in highly paid jobs are allowed to be better off through the tax system, and that's what we will campaign for. Longer term, I would love to see everybody, paying less tax, but for the moment, it's those at the bottom that have had a really rough, tough few years with wage compression and with tax rates kicking in, frankly, far too early. All right?
Let's do a couple of emails that are coming in. Nigel Farage just comes in from Rachel in Bexley. Boris Johnson is urging David Cameron to have a European vote next year. He says that is crucial. Would that persuade you to join a Conservative coalition? Because I read in my paper this week that you say on no terms anyway.
Look, Boris Johnson's attitude and view towards Europe is something that is a great mystery to me. It appears to change with every week, and depending on what part of the world he's in, whether he's an EU supporter or a sceptic, I simply do not know. The idea that Mr. Cameron would call a referendum earlier would, of course, mean that he would have to surrender the idea that we're going to renegotiate. Now, I've always thought this renegotiation, frankly, wasn't worth a row of beans. What I have said, Rachel, is this, that if UKIP do well in these elections on May the 7th, and if we find ourselves in a position of influence in Westminster, our absolute red line for trying to help anybody to form a government would have to be that we want a referendum. At the moment, that means there's no possibility of us even talking to the Labour Party because they've turned their backs on this idea. So what we would say to Mr. Cameron is, we want a referendum. Yes, we want an early referendum, but we also want it conducted on the right terms. So there would be a lot to talk about. But would I be bloody-minded and not want to try and come up with a formula that gave the British people a full, free and fair referendum? No, of course, that's exactly what I want them to have.
Last email before we go to other calls. This is from Nancy in the Lake District. I like the look of UKIP, and in fact, I like your look as well. I think you're important to British politics. Are you sick of the sneering tone the media has towards you, and why don't you do something about it?
Well, the media can be rough to everybody. This is hardly unique to UKIP. They can be rough to everybody. The one thing, Nancy, that gets me down is, you'll find a member of UKIP out in the country somewhere who is insignificant in the party, who says something silly, and I've argued this with Nick Nick Ferrari before on this programme, that makes headline news, and yet if they were Labour or Conservatives, no one would know about it. That's the one thing that I do complain about. What can I do about it? Well, really, frankly, not very much. Although, I do think this. The media is changing. We have radio, television, newspapers, but we also have the whole online world as well, and that's an area in which we're making great progress.
We go to other calls, Mr. Farage.
We go to John in Eastbourne.
Yeah, good morning, Nigel. First of all, I'd just like to say that I certainly would like to see you as the Prime Minister of my country. And because you obviously come over as certainly a charismatic character compared to the other two options on offer to us. The main reason I rang today, Labour and Tory constantly keep saying they want to build 300,000 new properties every year. And every single time I go out on the road to drive my car, I'm stuck in massive traffic jams. I think we should be discouraging our population from increasing, not sort of encouraging it as what Tory and Labour are doing at this present time.
Well, John, you raise a fair point. If we take the period from 1950 until the year 2000, on average, the UK population grew annually by up to 30,000 people a year through immigration, all right?
Yeah,
if you look at the figures from last year, it was 250,000. Now, so we have got new people coming into the country in unprecedented numbers. Many of them are young people who want to get on, and naturally, because of their age, they in turn are having more children. So we have had a rocketing population over the course of the last few years, and I agree with you. I think the impact on schools, hospitals, roads and everything else is absolutely mad. And let me just give you this one statistic, John, which you can remember and go and shock people with. How about this? We have to build a new property every 7 minutes. One new property every 7 minutes in this country just to cope with immigration into Britain. That, I think, is a very sobering thought in what is now the most overcrowded country in Europe. Thank you very much for your call. Should we move on to...
Let's move on, Mr. Farage. Yes, sir.
We're going to Jeremy in Harrow.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
Good morning. Fine, thanks.
Yeah, right. It's refreshing listening to you on the radio. It makes change from what I call the plain packaged parties like cigarettes. They've got the same stuff inside and the same stuff outside. Unbelievable. But here's the thing, because this is where I think we've got the future on this one. Mr. Cameron keeps talking about having this referendum and renegotiation. What possibility is there actually for him to actually represent or actually renegotiate this in view of the fact that what we have is a satrapy here? We haven't actually got a government at all. We've got a satrapy here enthralled to an unelected bureaucracy, and that's exactly what they are. They're second-rate failures. And before I finish on it, may I thank you and our Ukip MEPs from the bottom of my heart and everybody's heart for your refusing to recognise a terrorist Palestinian state. Well done.
Right. Let's just deal with the renegotiation point.
I think that's a good idea, Mr.
Because
Farage.
if we get dragged into the Palestine debate, we could be here a long time. Important though it is.
Yes, true.
Jeremy, Mr. Cameron, 5 times to my knowledge in 2012, said, I do not want to have a referendum, and I certainly don't want one on Britain's membership of the EU. He then, in early 2013, changed his tune. He did it because he feared the rise of Ukip would cut into his vote. All right, it's as simple as that. It was a cynical manoeuvre.
Yeah, that's true.
And then what he tried to do was to kick it into the long grass by saying that it would follow a lengthy renegotiation. Now, actually, quite a lot of the British public say if we have a successful renegotiation, then maybe our objections to the EU would vanish. What has become clear since then, I think, are 2 things. Firstly, the European Union has got bigger problems than us. There's a place on the Mediterranean called Greece, which has just elected a far-left wing government, and there's a huge battle going on there. You've also got the rise of protest movements in Italy and in Spain. So the European Union is focused on desperately trying to hold together the failing single currency project. They really haven't got much time, frankly, for us. And secondly, I know these people personally, Mr. Juncker, the big bosses in Brussels, and the one thing they will not renegotiate or even discuss is the question of open borders, which is the one thing the British people would want to see in a renegotiation. So frankly, I think Cameron's renegotiation strategy is hold below the waterline, and I've no doubt, as the election approaches, you will hear the Prime Minister sounding more sceptical than you've ever heard him before, and calling about an early referendum. The problem is, I don't really believe him, and I'm not sure the British voters do either.
Jeremy, thank you for that. Nigel Farage, we've got so many people who want to get involved. We've got to move it on. Sorry, Jeremy, blame me. Don't blame us, Farage.
Okay,
I have to make the call. Where do we go,
Let's
Nigel
fire
Farage?
on to Sheila in Leighton. Good morning, Sheila.
Hello, Nick. Hello, Nigel.
Hi.
Nigel, thank you for bringing a breath of fresh air to politics, and everybody I speak to will be voting for you.
Thank you.
Anyway, Nick, my question is, what would you do about the abuse in the care homes, and shouldn't cameras be put into those care homes? Jeremy Hunt, he's not doing anything he's saying. You know, we've had a programme on radio lately on the LBC where whistleblowers have spoke to him and he's told them to go away. He's not interested.
Let's get to Mr. Farage. Sheila, thank you for that very good question.
I think Jeremy Hunt is on the wrong end of this, and I think public opinion is so outraged by the way they've seen some of our elderly people being treated that we have to adopt, and he has to adopt, I think, a different approach to whistleblowers, because one or two of these whistleblowers have actually been proven to be right. Dreadful things have been done. On the issue of cameras, it's a difficult one. Because on the one hand, you know, we don't want to live in a Big Brother state, but I think given what some of those cameras have unveiled, I think it's pretty much impossible to fight against them. So I think our care homes are going to have to live with a lot more scrutiny, because I just think this is one of the things that's outraged people.
Isn't there intrusion on people's personal space there?
Yes.
I don't know necessarily that I want cameras on. I don't have an old father anymore, he's not with us, but my old dad in a care home, Mr. Farage. Isn't that a concern?
Nick, it's a huge concern, and I totally understand what you're saying, and my natural instinct would always to be against these sort of things, but I think that the use of secret cameras by that family the other day did actually highlight something. And the other thing, of course, that could be done is there could be more spot checks on these institutions. And perhaps if people don't know the inspectors are coming, then perhaps things would be found. But if a family wants to put a camera in the room, I think it would be very difficult, given what's been unearthed, to say they can't do it. All right?
Sheila, thank you. Where now, Mr.
We're going
Farage?
to Damien in Bristol. Good morning.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to know what your position on faith schools is, and whether you think they're segregating for society, with a particular emphasis on Jewish and Muslim schools in particular.
Well, I've always supported parental choice, Damien, within the education system, and for that reason, I've always supported faith schools. However, there is one very big downside with faith schools, and you only have to look at the kind of atmosphere that we've had in Belfast for all these years to realise that faith schools can, in some cases, continue to foster division and perhaps even hatred and loathing within a community. I think we've reached quite a good compromise in the sense that faith schools now are forced to have a percentage of pupils there who come from different faiths, which means, whilst it may well be, a Roman Catholic school or whatever it is, it has to have a percentage from other religions so that when those young men and women at 18 leave school, they do have an understanding of other people from different religious cultures. The one last thing I would say is that I know there's been great concern within the media and within the country about what might have been happening in some of the Muslim schools and were they being used, by people who wanted to radicalise. But it was very interesting that, in 2014, Michael Gove, as the education minister, began to find one or two examples of this in Birmingham and said he would do something about it. And for his trouble, he was removed as education minister. So Damien, it's a qualified yes to faith schools, but they must not become institutions that harbour division and hatred.
Thanks, Damien. Where now, Mr.
We're
Farage?
going to Tom in Morecambe.
Hello, Nigel.
Good morning.
I just wanted to your opinion on the ambulance service and what we should do to save it, really. I work for the paramedic emergency services, and we're basically at breaking point. Us personally and the ambulance service itself, it's quite normal now for us to do 16-hour shifts instead of 12-hour shifts because of late jobs and et cetera, and like I say, the morale in the ambulance service is absolutely rock bottom, and we're all really struggling in the ambulance service at the minute, but the staff and the patients as well. You know, sometimes we have to go to patients who have been waiting for 4 or 5 hours at a time, and it's getting quite serious now, really. So I just wanted to.
Tom, you're not the first person I've spoken to who works within the ambulance service that has given me a similar kind of story, and that's obviously concerning. I don't know the ins and outs specifically of the ambulance service, and I'm not going to pretend I do, but I will tell you this, Tom. I was looking at some figures the other day about total spending on the National Health Service, and looking that from the year 2000 to the year 2012, our spending on health in real terms was up by nearly 100%, and yet our delivery of beds in this case within the National Health Service was the figure that I looked at, was lower. And I think right throughout the healthcare system and all the associated services, we have poured in more and more and more money, and taxpayers actually don't particularly object to that. But we seem to be getting lower productivity, lower delivery, a massive increase in middle management and bureaucracy. So I'm certainly struck that the productivity within the National Health Service has not gone up in line with the money that we've spent. And I wonder whether that's the same case in the ambulance service. But I'm not qualified to give you a full answer on the ambulance service. I'm sorry.
Let me move to emails that are coming in. Thank you for that, Tom. Sorry, matey, but I've got to get as many questions in as I can. This is Benjamin, who says, what can UKIP do about the Labour Party and the NHS? They talk constantly about keeping it free for everyone. They're the only ones who've ever privatised the NHS through PFI. How can we and UKIP open the eyes to this increasing political hypocrisy?
Well, I agree. I mean, Andy Burnham goes on every radio and television show to say that the National Health Service is only safe in the hands of Labour and that everybody else would privatise it, when actually it was the Labour Party who, through PFI contracts and the outsourcing of things like hospital cleaning, did more to bring in the private sector than anybody's ever done since the NHS was created after the war. So yes, it's rank hypocrisy, but I repeat the point, Nick, I made to the previous caller from the ambulance service. The statistics that I've looked at, and we'll be talking about this next week in Rochester when UKIP has its big health launch, the point is this: Labour poured in vast resources, but they did not get better delivery in line with that money. So I find the Labour Party's position, frankly, unbelievable.
Thomas in Yorkshire, I'm a student. A lot of my students are saying, don't vote UKIP. I'm voting for the first time and I'm really interested. You don't find MPs or future MPs coming to uni freshers' fairs. Students are a big vote decider. No one visits our halls. When did you last go to a student hall? Would you come to mine? But he doesn't say where it is. Mr. Farage?
Well, I've spoken at vast numbers of schools and universities over the course of the last 16 years. UKIP does have a youth wing, and we were at many freshers' fairs around the country. But I do understand your comment. There has been, through the universities, quite a strong anti-UKIP line, and it's been there for years. And one of the reasons might be, Thomas, believe it or believe it not, there are 400 Monet professors in British universities. That means people whose departments get subsidy from the European Commission to teach history and economics from an EU perspective. So I do detect within our universities there is some Eurosceptic, the bias against Eurosceptics, including UKIP. Not an easy issue for UKIP, but actually not an easy issue for anybody. The one thing I did see, I chaired I sat on a panel of a massive student conference with Charlie Kennedy about 10 years ago, and they cheered him into the room. He was a hero figure to students, but I rather suspect the Lib Dems may have lost that support. I think the honest truth is, Nick, all political parties are struggling with the younger voter.
All right, so I think if we're quick, we can get in one more, if you would, Nigel.
Let's go to Abdul in Hammersmith. Good morning, Abdul. We haven't got long.
Hello. Good morning. I was going to ask a question about childcare, but just wanted to ask another question. In the wake of the Chapel Hill shooting and the double standards that we see on the Western media not covering it properly, what's your stance in your political party on Islamophobia and protecting the Muslims? And do you see a double standard in our Western media?
I see double standards.
But it's going to have to be brief, Mr. Farage.
I see double standards, Abdul, all through our country with lots of these debates, whether it's Islamophobia or whether it's Islamic extremism. Look, we all live together in this country, regardless of our age or our class or our race or our colour or our religion. The only way this country works or will work is if the law is applied equally to all. And I think we've been failing to do that.
Nigel Farage, I know half the country's trying to get through. We look forward to welcoming you again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Enjoy New York.
Okay, that's thank you very much indeed. So, yeah, it's back tomorrow, so I look forward to catching up with you. That's Nigel Farage, UKIP leader, appearing here on LBC, where news is next.
The UKIP leader Nigel Farage has told LBC he doesn't think he has ever avoided paying tax. He also says he believes Labour leader Ed Miliband